I think what the Harris campaign is going to do, I suspect, is identify a few areas of emphasis where there's a really sharp contrast with the Trump economic agenda. Number one, on taxes. It's not just the child tax credit that we talked about. When it comes to fiscal responsibility and raising taxes on the very wealthy and large corporations, the Trump plan is clear. It's a $4.6 trillion tax cut that goes largely, primarily to households making well over $400,000 a year. The Harris economic agenda, which comes out of the Biden-Harris budget, is to raise some taxes on the very wealthy and large corporations, help bring down the deficit by $2 trillion over the next 10 years, and at the same time provide some middle-class tax relief, something that's absent from the Trump economic plan. And so whether it's on taxes, whether it's on a willingness to actually stand up to corporate actors who are squeezing American families, where the vice president has a track record of that as Attorney General of California, Trump as president bent over backwards to do the bidding of corporations. And so I think you'll see a few areas of sharp contrast. And I think ultimately a case made by the Harris campaign that they are being more responsive to the actual concerns of American voters.
So while you may see sharp contrast in some areas, Bharat, there are at least similarities in others, including this idea on the subject of taxes and the deficit about not taxing tipped income. The Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget estimates that not doing that would increase the deficit by $100 to $200 billion over 10 years. Is this actually good economic policy?
I think, again, you have to put all of this into the context of a broader fiscal plan, a broader budget. I think when you put that plan alongside a policy to raise substantially more tax revenue from the very wealthy and large corporations and to ultimately drive down the budget deficit, which is what the Harris plan, the Harris Biden budget, it does, versus the Trump agenda, where this additional $100 or $200 billion in tax cuts comes on top of a $4.6 trillion tax cut that primarily goes to the wealthy. You can see how one is a reasonable set of policies that puts America on a better fiscal track, and one would massively blow out the deficit on top of, I should note, the $8 trillion of deficit increase that you saw in the first Trump term.
So on Friday, Kamala Harris gets on stage and says, look at the last 3 years of progress we've made. The Biden-Harris economic proposal moves forward if you elect me as president, because if you look at the CPI today, 4 months straight of easing inflation, everybody expects rate cuts to start in September. This coincides pretty nicely with a November election, doesn't it?
Yeah, I've said before that I think you're hitting a patch of real economic momentum here with inflation clearly easing, where at this point, I think the question for the Fed in September is not whether they will cut, but whether they cut by 25 basis points or 50 basis points. That's going to be an important moment where I think it will send a signal to the American public we've officially turned the page on inflation. And so there's a lot of momentum in the economy.
Can she say that, though? Can she say that? Because everyone's asking about drawing contrast with Joe Biden. What if she just gets up there and says, we won the war against inflation? Is that mission accomplished 2024?
I'm not sure if she's going to use that exact language, but I do think that she's going to be able to ride a lot of positive economic data into the fall and into November. If everything stays on the current trajectory, that's going to be another boost to a campaign that's already done very, very well over the last couple of weeks in building the case for it. And so I think what she has an opportunity to do is to try to explain to the American public how her economic agenda is going to be responsive to the concerns that they are feeling in their lives today. Obviously, the cost of living is a big one, the cost of housing, the cost of childcare, the cost of higher education. But I also think part of it is who can create a calm, predictable atmosphere for businesses to thrive in. And what we saw during the first Trump term was chaos and uncertainty that I think really put a toll on the ability of businesses to conduct, to do their work on a daily basis. And with the Harris administration, I think you'll see a lot of regulatory predictability, a lot of working with the business community, especially the small business community, to make sure that they have the tools that they need to grow.
As we consider her economic policy, it is also pointing out she's been hit too on the border, specifically an issue with which Republicans are charging that as borders are, she essentially, to summarize, really messed things up. Can we separate migration, immigration policy from economic policy now, though, as Donald Trump is accusing her of taking a turn toward his kind of policy, hardening some of her language when it comes to migration, knowing the impact that it has had on growth on the labor market? Could that kind of more rightward shift, or at least harsher shift when it comes to the border and migration, actually be something that takes an economic toll?
Look, I think the president and the vice president from the very beginning of the administration have been talking about the need for comprehensive immigration reform that involves more border security, more funding for border patrol agents and so on, but also changes on legal immigration and a way of addressing all the folks, the dreamers that have been here in the United States, and providing them with a pathway to citizenship. I think that's the right balance of steps to address some of the labor issues that you talked about, while at the same time making sure that we have a strong border and can enforce the rules that we have about crossing the border. I think that the vice president, if you look at the actual data, the administration has done a good job of addressing migration across the border. We saw that the steps that the president took a couple of months ago via executive order have led to a significant decrease in illegal crossings. But at the end of the day, this is an area where Congress needs to act. And we remember the Senate had a bipartisan proposal that the president and vice president supported, and that Donald Trump came in at the last second to urge Republicans to vote against it, in my view, because he would rather campaign on the issue than try to solve the problem.